Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
And I'm number one fan, Tim.
Okay, so as I've stated before, my wife took our children to my mother-in-law's house where she lived previously to quarantine because I was still working at the time out in the community. She was worried. And I thought it was a little silly, but I understood at first. That was the day before St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
So we're now in week 7 of this whole experiment that she's conducting. And I got to say, I'm pretty much like at my wit's end with being nice about it. For instance, I was over there like a week and a half or two ago, and I was talking to her about how silly it is that she won't let me hold the kids because she's afraid I'll, if I'm asymptomatic, they might catch something. And I said, you're acting like a fucking tyrant. And then she got pissed and walked into the house. This is while I was over there doing one of our, I'm going to air quote this, visits, where I sit in the car and they sit in the driveway 10 feet away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And then she texts me later and is like, how am I being a tyrant? I'm like, you're making all the decisions for our kids that we have joint custody of as a married couple. You are making all the decisions over this. I have no say. So I'm being forced to adhere to your will, even though it adversely affects me. That's tyranny. Sorry to say, but that's what you're doing. Well, it just doesn't make any sense to me because, she goes to the grocery store, and anything you touch at the grocery store could have been touched by somebody that was sick and didn't know it at the time, and then you get it, so you're not staying at the house. You're doing things. You've gone places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She goes every day to pick up free lunch from school, and then they give out free dinner packages at the YMCA, I guess.
I didn't hear about that, but I knew about the school lunch thing. That's what my wife is doing.
Instead of making lunch?
She's going to the school and getting the free food and everything, so...
Well, we already pay the taxes for the school year, so use the fucking food budget money to feed the kids.
Yeah, to me, that's fine.
Okay, so she's sitting there at her parents' house, and I can talk to them at a distance of 10 feet, and then otherwise we video conference. Now, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea about this situation. So I just want to preface our last night's conversation by stating that this is fucking ridiculous. The amount of possible contagion that I could have contributed to this equation. Like, I've been working at home for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Not out in the public anymore since the last week of March. We're in the second week of May. So, it's not that I think it's fucking ridiculous. It is.
It is ridiculous.
So her parents are elderly, I'll give her that. And they require some help, and they have health issues. Her mom's immunocompromised because she's a breast cancer survivor. Her dad is in his 80s. He's got dementia and heart issues and a myriad of health issues on top of that. And her sister, who also lives there, is like a year older than me, has Down syndrome. But I don't think that means she's more susceptible to COVID-19 as much as she is to diabetes and smothering Beanie Babies with hugs.
She did seem pretty harmless when I met her.
So I have not been able to hold my son or daughter for over 7 weeks now because, quote, I'm still working and going out in the community, which is bullshit because I've been working almost exclusively from home for over a month now. And never mind, like I said, my wife's gone to the store for groceries and touched cans of green beans that other people have touched. And I've been working, though, so holy shit. Or, I've also been around my other 2 daughters who bounce between multiple residences regularly, but you're welcome for our contributions towards herd immunity.
That's how your immune system gets strong. It needs practice.
Right. Her mom has said that if they're around me too much or too closely, she's going to send them back here, which wouldn't be a problem unless there was something wrong there, and then she wouldn't be allowed back to care for her sister or mom or dad or whatever the combination of calamity would be. So...
Sounds like part of this is her mother's fault.
Yeah, she tells me I should lay off her mom in that regard, but I disagree. It started with my mother-in-law, basically, didn't want to even let me in the house. Which, any one of them could be asymptomatic carriers. Mm-hmm. So just an FYI, she's been to my house multiple times to pick things up that she's needed. And I have hugged her, or a couple times many weeks ago kissed her, a handful of times. So let's take a second to shatter that false sense of calm and security. You've been contaminated.
Yep. Unless she went home and doused herself in near boiling hot water and disinfectant before she even walked into the garage, that shit's all over that house now.
Oh, yeah. So, like I said, I get to go visit the kids, but I do it from inside the car, and they're like 10 feet away from me, which has to look absolutely retarded to anybody who is in the know.
I can picture it, and it looks retarded.
Her neighbors might not be privy to the info of what's going on, and maybe they just think that I'm a creep, or I'm really bad at child luring. But I just want to hop out of the car and grab my 2-year-old and lick her face and then run back in the car and drive off. Just to be a dick. Like when you were a kid and you would wipe boogers on stuff and wait to watch who touched it afterwards so you could giggle.
So I think you're alone in that regard.
Okay. Or if you were me, you wiped shit on the stall walls in high school and laughed about other people that would possibly be sniffing it. Or the janitor cleaning it.
I would draw like cartoons and alien ships and stuff. What the fuck's wrong with you?
You take that first wipe.
No.
That's pretty chunky. And then you smear it on the wall and you make a smiley face with it. Circle, smile, boop, boop for the eyes. And then you laugh about the fact that you made a poopy smiley face on the wall.
Gross. There's something wrong with you.
Nobody expects to walk into a stall and see anything drawn with feces on the wall.
No, because they just assume that not everybody in the schools are retarded. What the fuck, man?
It's not that I'm a fecal-philiac. It's that I like to picture other people being surprised.
No, I think you're a fecal-philiac with all the poop chronicles.
So the other night, I'm giving my wife endless amounts of shit over this whole quarantine and visit schedule thing because I'm very mature and not petty or small-minded at all.
Nope.
So she commented about how our 2-year-old was awake still at 11:30 and shouting at my stepdaughter to wake up. And she says, I wish I could send her down the block to the daycare lady's house to play with her friend. Just, get her some exposure to some other kids other than being stuck with her sister all the time. And I said, man, if only she knew some other kids that she could interact with in a familiar and comfortable environment.
Here we go again.
And
but where will we find such a place?
So she just responds back with 3 dots, like a pause. I knew that would get under her skin.
You don't say.
Like the point of this mainly is to prove the hypocrisy. Never mind the legal implications of denying me physical and custodial contact with our kids. That's a whole other can of worms. It's the hyper worry involved in all of this that's really getting my goat. Like her mom sends her away and won't let her come back if she's contaminated. That if there's a problem at home, she won't be able to come back and help. But somehow, I don't know, it's fucking ridiculous to me that someone's that worried like it's the Black Plague. And you know what's a bigger threat to her father's health right now than my presence?
Stairs?
Gravity. Fucking gravity.
I was pretty close.
Dude. Not like he's got to be tied down to heavy objects or he might float away. It's because he's fall prone and somebody his age that takes a tumble and breaks a hip statistically is dead in 6 to 9 months. Or if, like a number of other times, he goes ass over apple cart and cracks his head on something, they're worried he might have a subdermal hematoma, bleeding on the brain, which they've said they think that he is bleeding on the brain. So his mind is just like marinating.
It's pretty much done
in these juices. And, he's fallen down, like fucking 20 times in the past year. Just an ungodly amount.
Jesus Christ.
Well, here's the thing. Other people have constantly asked me at work, like, are the kids back home yet? And I tell them no. And they just look so fucking confused at first. And then I have to spend a minute rationalizing it with this ungodly long string of words to communicate the medical vulnerability of her parents and sister and how she needs to be there just in case. So I have to rationalize this fucking insanity to people that as soon as I say it, they look at me and they're like bewildered. My wife says to me, and I quote, "Are you sure you're reading their faces correctly?"
You of all people that I know, it's probably the most accurate at reading people. You're definitely within the top 2% of people I know that can read people like a book.
Well, I'm just going to describe some of the physical characteristics of their faces when I tell them my children are not yet back home with me. Squinted eyes, furrowed brow, head tilted slightly askew like a fucking puppy. Yeah, yep, I think I've got it down. I'm not a Martian. Like, I've been around people.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't just come to this country a week ago, and this isn't like the movie Castaway, where I don't know how to reacclimate back into society properly. How do you reason with somebody that's this far up their own ass about the fragility of life?
You know, I would, honestly, I'm sitting here thinking, if it were my wife, at this point in time, I'd lay out the facts. Big, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to lay this out, and then don't interrupt me. Lay everything out, and at the end be like, no, there's only one of two things going to happen. Either you're going to fucking move back home so we can be a family, or we're done, and I'm coming after custody. That's what that's what I do. Because, you know, bullshit. This is bullshit.
Well, I've told her a couple of my friends suggested, you should get a lawyer. Because she's denying you your custodial rights.
Yeah, that too.
So here's a good thing about this that makes me feel awesome. My 2-year-old, when I tell her I want to hug her, or I need a hug now, says, "I tan't hug you, Daddy. I tan't." Which, when you hear it, sounds both adorable and retarded. Because
Sounds
she's got
cold.
the speech impediment. So you've gone so far towards teaching her that we need to socially distance that she now thinks that my hugs are like being enveloped in plague-covered tentacles. Do you have any idea how shitty that feels? I mean, it's cute, because of the way she says it also, but like a kick in the feels. Like, imagine if one day your otherwise obedient dog decided that he wasn't going to lick Skippy off your nuts anymore because he hangs out with someone else who has a peanut allergy. That's the best analogy I could come up with. She doesn't want her to hug me because she's got medically vulnerable people that she hangs out with, but the dog's like, I can't do that anymore. I know somebody. They've got an allergy. It could get serious. My breath could kill them.
When I kiss him, I don't want peanut butter ball.
Yeah. And then don't get me fucking started on the milestones I've missed with my son who's about to turn 9 months old. When he left with her to go over there for this little fucking social experiment, he was just starting to scoot properly some. Now, he is crawling and climbing stairs, pulling himself up on things, almost standing independently. He sprouted 2 teeth, and he now says sounds that almost sound like actual words.
Thank you for robbing me of all that.
I keep throwing that at her, and she's...
I'm kind of losing respect for her.
But think of all the shit that kid has changed for his abilities in 7 weeks. You would think that, like, the brain juice they gave to Charlie and flowers for Algernon was coming out of my wife's tits. And causing him to be this near genius baby. And just so you know, that's a literary reference. It's a book, Flowers for Algernon.
Yeah, I know.
They made a movie out of it called Charlie.
Familiar with it.
I like to sprinkle those in from time to time to prove that I paid attention in 7th grade English class. So if you hear all of this and you think that this situation sounds absolutely bananas, it's because it is.
Please comment below.
Yeah, my wife needs to stand up to her mom and stop kicking that common sense can down the road so much. My kid doesn't want to hug me, and my son is like way more advanced now. By the time I eventually get to hold him again, it'll be like taking a puppy and sending it off to training school, and then he comes back and he's on the police force and he knows how to sniff out drugs and tackle perps and shit.
I remember Mrs. Number One family was in the hospital for like 3 weeks. Because she had some complications from surgeries.
Yeah.
And when she first went to the hospital, one of the girls wasn't potty trained yet. And when she came back from the hospital, I had that girl potty trained.
That's another thing, is our 2-year-old is virtually potty trained now.
Nice.
And she had gone on the toilet like 3 times here prior to that. I mean, don't get me wrong. She kind of took a shit in the middle of the entryway at their house the other day. Took off her diaper and just pooped on the floor, which I think is hilarious because it happened over there. But and I asked her about it, and I'm like, so, did you poop on the floor? I did. Why? Because I like to poop on the floor.
Like, you're just like Daddy.
The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It? That is at What Do We Call It? You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show. For the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann.
And I'm number one fan Tim.
And that's the end.